So let me welcome now Wolfgang Wachter from the DFG, where he will present us funding opportunities in Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Well, good morning, everybody. This is the very last talk of this session, the last talk before lunch. And yeah, you may wonder, what am I doing here as a representative of the German Research Foundation, a national funding organization in a European funding workshop? Well, the answer is that, as a matter of fact, when it comes to funding in Europe, the national research funding foundations still play a very important role. So I would like to briefly introduce you my organization as one example of such a national research funding organization, only very briefly. Then also, very briefly, I would like to introduce to you some of our funding opportunities for early career researchers. But the point I would really like to focus today is this one, the do's and don'ts when writing a proposal, some practical tips, of course, based on my personal experience for DFG, but I think a lot may be generalized to other funding schemes, other funding agencies. So the DFG Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft is Germany's largest research funding organization. It is financed by the federal government, the state governments, and to a very small proportion also by private funders. Our annual total budget is about 3.2 billion euros. So here you can see our evaluation process. As I said, I do not want to go into the details here, but what I would like to stress is that it is a three-step process. Step number one is written reviews by experts in the field. Step number two, a comparative assessment by elected review board members. And step number three, finally, the decision by the joint committee. These are scientists of all fields of science. Of course, they rely on the expertise of the experts, but they make a comparative assessment over all fields of science at the end. Well, funding opportunities. So first of all, of course, we have to evaluate your eligibility as an applicant. And eligible means you have to have completed your scientific training. That means you have to hold a doctorate. And you would like to work in Germany. Of course, this is irrespective of your nationality and, of course, also irrespective of your age. Actually, there's a variety of different funding programs, and especially for early career researchers, we have a lot of different funding schemes, each tailored to each step of your scientific career. So we also call it the funding chain, because one element comes after the other. And as I said, I do not want to go into the details. At the rear end of this room, there are also some brochures, maybe still left, where you can find some more details about them. Well, just to highlight a few of them. Of course, already before your PhD and also after that, you can always apply for a position in a DFG project that has already been funded. This means you don't apply with us, but you contact directly the project's PI. Normally in each DFG-funded project, there is a PhD position or maybe also a postdoc position available. The duration depends, of course, on the funding of the project, but as a rule, it is 3 years for PhD students and maybe 2 or 3 years for a postdoc. When you have completed your PhD, you can apply for a research fellowship to do some research abroad. That means in any country, but not in Germany. But to be eligible for this, you have to be integrated into Germany's science system. That means you have to have spent a large part of your study time in Germany. Another option is to apply for a temporary position as a principal investigator. This can be done as part of our research grants funding scheme, our most common funding scheme. That means you apply for a project and also for your own position. The project has to be done exclusively in Germany. The duration is again normally 3 years, and there is the option of a renewal proposal. Of course, this is quite competitive, and of course, you have to be in close contact to your host institution before you submit such a proposal. And then, if you are a bit more advanced in your scientific career, if you're already achieving eligibility for tenure, the Aminöter program may be something for you. You may have heard of this. This is quite a competitive, quite a prestigious funding program. Its aim is to path you the way to early academic independence and to increase your eligibility by leading your own independent junior research groups. So what you have to have done before is you have to have required research experience of at least 2 years and a maximum of 4 years. There's an additional period of 2 years per child if you have children. And of course, that is also important, you have to show international research experience. The duration is generally 6 years. It used to be 5, but now it has been changed to 6. And of course, you have to apply by a proposal to DFG. And even later in your career step, there's the Heisenberg program for people who are already eligible for professorship. This gives you a chance for duration of maximum 5 years to further improve your academic skills. Okay, so this was it very briefly. As I said, it's not enough time to go into the details there, but I didn't want to do this. What I wanted to show you is this. When it comes to funding programs, it is not all the same, but there are many different programs with very different goals and prerequisites, and it's really important to you to carefully select this program that is best suited to fund your idea and best suited to the current state of your academic career. Okay, but now as I promised, the do's and don'ts when writing a proposal. Well, first of all, kind of a disclaimer, my apologies, but what I cannot give you today is sort of a recipe how to write a successful proposal, nor a guarantee of success, nor a complete list of mistakes to avoid. But what I am going to tell you today is a few points you should definitely keep in mind and some frequent misunderstandings that can easily be avoided. Please be careful, of course, this is my own experience, and some of these tips may be closely related to DFG and our funding programs, but as I said, I think a lot of them may also be generalized to other research funding schemes. Well, let's start with some very basic tips. First of all, it is important to carefully review and follow the guidelines and the proposal instructions. Please do have a close look at the review criteria because they are different for each funding scheme and different for each funding agency. So there's a lot of relevant information that can be found on the agency's website, and also this may be quite annoying to read all this stuff. Please do so because it is important to address these points. Then please do contact us at the head office if you have any questions. Please communicate openly. Also, if you feel a conflict of interest, if you think that a specific person should not be the reviewer for this proposal, please contact us, tell us the reasons, and you can be sure this person will not be asked as a reviewer for this proposal. Please do seek honest criticism from your colleagues. Normally they are also experienced in writing proposal grants, and I'm sure they will be able to give you valuable advice. Then the proposal should, of course, be well prepared. As you already heard, I can only underline this, so please do take your time to prepare this proposal. It is important that you are convinced before you submit your proposal, because if you are not convinced, I think nobody else will be. And please do plan a feasible timeline, the time between submission and the decision about your proposal. On average, at least for DFG, this time is over 6 months. Of course, it varies depending on the agency, and if you're not sure, please contact the head office, and please be sure you plan on a feasible and realistic timeline. The next tips I would like to summarize by the sentence, put yourself in the reviewer's shoes. That means just imagine if you are the reviewer, what would you expect? For example, of course, the proposal should be well focused on what can be achieved within the funding period. Also, the budget should be realistic. To say it in a bit more plain words, rather start with smaller projects at the beginning. Don't be too ambitious concerning the size of your first project. The knowledge gap and the working hypothesis should be clearly defined. I think this is quite obvious, but of course it needs to be done. And also, please explain why your scientific approach is original and innovative and why it is promising. Of course, it goes without saying, please do avoid things like buzzwords and polemic comments on the work of colleagues. This is something nobody wants to hear and to read in a proposal. And of course, your project should be clearly distinguishable from the work of your mentors and your colleagues. Maybe even a bit more in a nutshell, not because I think you need it, but because I learned in our workshop on Monday about science communication, to make the message clear and concise. Imagine you are the reviewer. Of course, not all of our reviewers look like this gentleman, but anyway, I like the cartoon. So imagine what might this person ask you. Maybe, why is this a new and fascinating idea that should be funded? And, are you the right person for the project? Are you well prepared? And why is this the right funding scheme for this very idea? And I think if you keep these points in mind, you are already on a very good track. Yeah, in the last minutes, I would like to be more specific about the single parts of your proposal. Of course, these are the sections in the DFG proposal, but again, I think it may be quite similar for many others. First of all, of course, you have to define the state of the art and to describe your previous own work. There it is important to put your project in the scientific context. That means you need to identify the knowledge gap, to give a motivation for the project. So why is it important to close this very specific knowledge gap? You have to derive a hypothesis and to explain what is your specific experience and your preliminary work. So for example, if you have already done a proof of concept, if we have already methodological knowledge, this is important to mention here. Also important, this part, as the whole proposal, should be comprehensible without having to consult further literature. Of course, you always need a bibliography in your proposal, but please bear in mind that this is optional for the reviewers, so they may have a look at it if they want, but they should be able to understand your proposal without any additional literature. Yeah, it would be wrong here just to write kind of a review or a textbook, but it is important to guide the reader towards the aims of your proposal. So for the aims of your proposal, it is of course important to be specific based on your hypothesis. So your leading question should not be, what would I like to do, but rather, what would I like to find out? And at least for a funding organization that is devoted to fundamental research, you should argue that the augmentation of basic scientific knowledge is what you want to do, and not something like data collection or the optimization of a method that is already well known. Then it comes to the work program, and there it is important to describe as precisely as possible what you're planning to do. So for example, please explain for which specific purpose, which parts of the work program are to be done. Please also point out possible difficulties and describe a strategy to deal with the risk of your proposal. Of course, a good proposal needs to be risky, but yeah, it is good to develop something like a plan B if particularly risky parts of the work program should fail. This is good because it shows the reviewers that you are well aware of the risk and you know what to do if it doesn't work precisely in the way you would like. And please also present a rough time schedule. Of course, everyone knows that you cannot predict the future, but you should show that you are well prepared and you have an idea and a good planning how you would like to go on. It would be wrong here just to give unspecific listings, in particular of potential methods that might be used, but please describe what you would like to do. And of course, during the time you will work on your project, many things will occur that you haven't predicted so far, but you should know, should show that you're well prepared and have a clear idea what would you like to do. Then when it comes to the budget, at least for my organization, I can say that it is the justification that counts. That means I cannot say if the proposal is over 200,000 euros, then it is bad, but I can say for everything you apply for, you should give a good and project-specific reason why you need it for this project. So especially if you plan to apply for more than one position in your project as a personnel, please define separate work packages for each person. When you apply for instrumentation, this is possible, but you have to justify why these instruments are needed specifically for this project. Also for the consumables and for the travel budget, please be specific. For example, don't write, I want to attend 3 conferences, but do write, I would like to attend the next EuChemS conference in Lisbon, for example. So again, please do not give only listings, but please do give convincing project-specific arguments for all positions of the budget. Then comes the abstract or the summary, and this is sometimes the most difficult or tricky part of the whole proposal, because this is a source of information, not so much for the expert reviewers, but rather for the people who are non-experts, but are sitting on the panels that make the final decision, so it is important. Of course, these people rely on the experts' comments, but they should have a clear understanding or sort of idea what would you like to do and why it is important. So you should shortly describe the knowledge gap that is intended to be filled. You should outline your aims and, of course, the scientific impact to be expected. Yeah, together with the proposal, at least at us, at many others, you have to hand in also your CV, which is kind of your business card. We have heard already a lot about the CV. I can only confirm and underline what we have heard here so far about this. So please do structure it clearly. Please don't forget important pieces of information like prizes, awards, previous funding you already achieved. And one personal comment from my side, please do also point out breaks in your CV that may have been caused by deceased or by family reasons. Not because we want you to be indiscreet, but because the reviewers should be informed about the circumstances that may have been obstacle to your scientific career. Because only if they know, they are able to place your CV and maybe possible gaps in your publication list into the right context, and I can say they will do if they know the circumstances and the reasons. Last but not least, of course, we keep our fingers crossed that your proposals will be successful, but statistically, well, there's almost no scientist, or there is no scientist who has never got a rejection for a proposal. So what happens if your proposal was not successful? My first advice would be this here. Please don't get discouraged. Please do not take the reviewer's criticism personally, because it is really related to the project and not to you as a scientist, and it is meant to help you to improve your idea. At least at DFG, and not only at DFG, we forward the complete reviews, which may, and in many cases they will, give you valuable hints for a possible revision. And yeah, at least for my organization, a rejected proposal may be resubmitted in a revised version any time, but of course, you have to take into account the reviewer's comments very carefully, and you have to show how you have reacted to them and improved your proposal. Okay, that's it for the moment. Of course, I'm happy to take questions now and also later. I do have, of course, an email address and also a telephone on my desk, so please feel free to contact me in case of any questions. Thanks for the invitation and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Please. join me in thanking all the speakers of this morning session. And I will just have one very short word to finish on the EYCN. EYCN is really trying to help people in Europe to get more information on what kind of source of funding we have. So we have a website with map.eycn.eu where you can click on each country and check what are the general funding for PhD, postdocs, and things like this. And we do also as well try to provide support if you have questions or redirect your questions for this kind of funding. So please do not forget and think EYCN when you have questions about these points. Thank you very much.